Break free from mental traps and master clear thinking. Discover the hidden psychological traps that cloud your judgment, ruin decisions, and limit success. Learn how to think with clarity, confidence, and purpose. No fluff, just powerful, practical insights to rewire your mind and transform your life, one smart decision at a time.
Introduction. Have you ever made a decision that felt right only to regret it later and wonder, what was I thinking? You're not alone. Every day, smart people make poor choices, not because they're unintelligent, but because their thinking is silently hijacked by psychological traps. These hidden patterns distort your judgment, cloud your clarity, and quietly sabotage your success. This book will expose 10 of the most dangerous mental pitfalls that ruin decisions in your career, relationships, money, and personal growth. Backed by science and simplified for daily life, each chapter gives you tools to rewire your mind and start thinking clearly, even under pressure. If you want to make smarter decisions, unlock your true potential, and break free from mental traps holding you back, this book is your roadmap. Subscribe, take notes, and let's rebuild your thinking one clear decision at a time.
Chapter 1. The Illusion of Control, When Confidence Becomes a Trap. Have you ever studied hard for an exam, aced every question, and thought, I've got this whole thing figured out? Or maybe you invested in a stock that shot up in value, and suddenly you felt like a financial genius. Moments like these give us a strong sense that we're in control, not just of our actions, but of the outcomes. But here's the truth. Feeling in control isn't the same as being in control. This chapter is about a psychological trap called the illusion of control, the tendency for people to overestimate their ability to influence events even when the outcomes are largely determined by chance. This illusion is comforting. It gives us a sense of certainty in an unpredictable world, but it can also be dangerously misleading. It makes us take bigger risks, ignore warning signs, and blame ourselves unnecessarily when things go wrong. And here's the scary part. The smarter and more confident you are, the more likely you are to fall into this trap. The subtle power of the illusion. Let's begin with a classic experiment. In 1975, psychologist Ellen Langer conducted a study where participants were asked to play a simple game of chance, a lottery. Some participants were allowed to choose their lottery ticket, while others were given a ticket at random. Later, when given the opportunity to sell their ticket back, those who had chosen their ticket valued it significantly more than those who had received one randomly. Why? The odds for winning were identical, pure chance. Yet those who chose their ticket felt more ownership and control, and thus believed they had a higher chance of winning. This experiment reveals something profound about how our minds work. We often confuse choice with control, and control with certainty. The simple act of doing something, picking, choosing, initiating, gives us the false impression that we can also control the outcome. This is where the illusion of control begins. Where it shows up in everyday life. This illusion affects almost every area of your life, often in ways you don't even realize. Let's look at some examples. 1. Investing and finance. Many people believe they can beat the market with the right strategy or a lucky tip. After a few successful trades, they develop a sense of mastery. But the financial markets are complex systems influenced by global factors far beyond an individual's control. The illusion of control leads to overconfidence, riskier bets, and eventually, often painful losses. 2. Career decisions. Imagine getting a great job after nailing the interview. Naturally, you feel like your performance was the deciding factor, and it probably helped. But what about timing, internal politics, or the hiring manager's mood? These uncontrollable elements are often ignored. Believing you're fully in control can cause you to become blind to these unseen variables, and later, when outcomes don't go your way, you're left confused or even self-critical. 3. Relationships. People often believe they can fix others, change their partner's behavior, their friend's attitude, or their child's habits if they just try hard enough. But relationships involve two or more minds, and you can't control someone else's emotions or choices. The illusion of control in relationships often leads to frustration, manipulation, or resentment. The cost of believing you're in control. At first glance, the illusion of control doesn't seem so bad. Isn't confidence a good thing? Shouldn't we believe in ourselves? Yes, but false confidence leads to false security. Here's what happens when the illusion of control goes unchecked. You take unnecessary risks because you overestimate your ability to handle the outcome. You feel defeated when things go wrong, blaming yourself for factors you couldn't control. You miss important signs because your mind is focused on what you can do instead of what's actually happening. You become rigid, less likely to adapt or ask for help because control feels like something you must maintain at all costs. Over time, this mindset erodes mental clarity. It creates stress, fuels perfectionism, and leads to poor decision-making, especially in high-stakes moments. Why your brain wants to feel in control. Let's get into the science for a moment. Your brain is a prediction machine. It constantly looks for patterns, cause and effect relationships, and familiar routines. When it sees something happen after your action, even if it's unrelated, it makes a connection. This is an evolutionary advantage. Early humans who believed they could influence their environment were more likely to survive. For example, if someone believed that dancing before a hunt brought success, they were more likely to keep hunting and survive, even if the dance had no real effect. Today, this same tendency manifests in modern life. We feel safer when we believe we're in control, even if we're not. It reduces anxiety. It gives our brains a narrative. But here's the catch. Your brain prefers certainty over accuracy, and that's a dangerous trade.
How to break the illusion without losing confidence. So how do we maintain belief in ourselves without lying to ourselves? The goal isn't to become passive or helpless. It's to develop what psychologists call calibrated confidence, a mindset where your belief in yourself is based on real awareness, not false certainty. Here's how you can start. 1. Separate process from outcome. Start judging your decisions based on how you made them, not just what happened. Bad outcome doesn't always mean bad decision. A well-researched investment might still fail. A healthy lifestyle might not prevent illness. What matters is that you made the best decision with the information you had. Focus on your process. Ask, did I gather enough information? Was I reacting emotionally or thinking clearly? Did I consider variables outside my control? 2. Use the circle of control exercise. Take out a piece of paper. Draw 2 circles, one inside the other. In the inner circle, write down what you can control, your actions, attitude, effort. In the outer circle, write down what you can't control, other people's reactions, timing, random events. Whenever you're stressed, revisit this visual. Refocus on the inner circle. It's a simple but powerful way to regain clarity and drop unnecessary worry. 3. Embrace probabilistic thinking. The best thinkers don't think in absolutes. They think in likelihoods. Instead of saying, this will definitely work, say, this has a 70% chance of working based on what I know. This slight shift helps you stay humble, open to new information, and more emotionally resilient if things don't go as planned. 4. Stay curious, not certain. Certainty shuts down learning. Curiosity opens it up. When you feel overly sure about something, pause and ask, what if I'm wrong? What am I not seeing? What else could be true here?
These questions reduce the grip of control and bring your thinking back into focus. 5. Practice strategic humility. Strategic humility isn't weakness, it's wisdom. It's knowing when to trust your instincts and when to step back, ask questions, and seek advice. The world's best decision makers, from top CEOs to elite athletes, don't try to control everything. They manage what they can, plan for what they can't, and build mental flexibility for the unknown. That's real strength. The takeaway: the illusion of control is sneaky. It whispers that you're the master of everything, that you can will outcomes into existence with enough effort or belief. And while confidence is valuable, false control leads to real chaos. When you learn to separate action from outcome, control from chaos, and effort from certainty, that's when your mind becomes clear. That's when your decisions become smarter, calmer, and more effective. Because true power doesn't come from controlling everything. It comes from knowing what you can't control and choosing wisely anyway. Action steps to reinforce this chapter. Journal prompt: reflect on a time you felt fully in control, but the outcome didn't go as planned. What factors were actually outside your control? 2. Daily reminder: begin each morning by writing down 3 things you can control today. 3. Decision filter: before making a big decision, ask, is this confidence or control talking? 4. Discussion challenge: share this concept with a friend. Discuss a time when the illusion of control affected you both. Teaching reinforces learning. Your journey to thinking clearly starts with letting go, not of responsibility, but of the need to control everything. When you let go of the illusion, you make space for insight, wisdom, and better choices.
Chapter 2. The Confirmation Curse: How Beliefs Blind You. Have you ever Googled something like, "Why coffee is good for you?" and ignored the articles that said it was bad? Or perhaps you've gotten into a debate and only remembered the points that supported your side, while dismissing or forgetting the rest. Congratulations! You've met one of the most dangerous mental traps in existence: confirmation bias. And whether you realize it or not, it's shaping your decisions every single day. Confirmation bias is the natural human tendency to search for, interpret, and remember information in a way that confirms what we already believe. It feels comforting. It validates our opinions, but it also distorts reality, limits growth, and keeps us stuck in outdated or wrong thinking, even when the truth is right in front of us. This trap is so subtle that you often don't realize it's happening. That's what makes it so powerful and so destructive. Why your brain loves being right, even when it's wrong. Your brain isn't wired for truth. It's wired for survival. And one of the easiest ways to survive socially and emotionally is to feel certain. Certainty gives your mind a sense of order. Doubt and confusion, on the other hand, feel threatening. So instead of constantly questioning your beliefs, your brain tries to protect them by filtering out anything that might contradict them. Here's how it works. When you come across evidence that supports your belief, your brain lights up with pleasure. When you see something that challenges your belief, your brain often ignores it, rationalizes it, or attacks it. This isn't a flaw, it's a feature of human cognition. But left unchecked, this feature becomes a dangerous bug in your decision-making system. How confirmation bias shows up in everyday life. Let's look at how this curse silently infects various areas of your life. Number 1. News and social media. Social platforms are built on algorithms that feed you content you already agree with. If you believe a certain political view, the system will show you more of that, reinforcing your belief over time. Before long, your entire worldview becomes an echo chamber. You begin to think, how can anyone believe otherwise? Because you're rarely exposed to opposing views in a fair, balanced way. This makes your thinking narrow, reactive, and vulnerable to manipulation. Number 2. Personal relationships. In relationships, once you form a belief about someone, good or bad, you start seeing them through that filter. If you think your partner is inconsiderate, you'll notice every small mistake, but you'll overlook the 10 things they did right. This creates emotional distance, resentment, and false narratives. Your bias is writing stories for you, and you're reading them as truth. Number 3. business and career. Imagine you're a team leader who thinks a certain strategy will work. You collect data, talk to others, and guess what? You notice all the feedback that supports your idea. You ignore the warnings. And when things go wrong, it seems like a surprise. But in reality, the warning signs were there all along. Confirmation bias kills innovation and smart risk management in business. It makes leaders blind to danger and deaf to feedback. The science behind the bias. Research in cognitive psychology confirms this bias is baked deep into human thinking. A famous study by psychologist Peter Wason in the 1960s demonstrated that when people were asked to test a rule, they overwhelmingly tried to confirm it instead of trying to disprove it, even though disconfirmation is a more accurate way to test a hypothesis. Other studies using brain scans have found that when people encounter conflicting information, the areas of the brain associated with reasoning often shut down, while the emotional areas light up. In other words, we emotionally defend our beliefs instead of logically examining them. This isn't just theory. It happens to you daily. The cost of living in echo chambers. There's a hidden tax you pay when you only seek confirmation. You stop growing. You surround yourself with people who think like you. You only read books or watch videos that agree with your worldview. You avoid discomfort, challenge, and uncertainty, all of which are required for real growth. This bias doesn't just keep you safe, it keeps you small. And in a world that's changing faster than ever, small thinking becomes dangerous. If you want to make smart decisions, grow in your career, improve relationships, and become mentally resilient, you must learn how to see beyond your own beliefs. How to break free from the confirmation curse. It's not easy, but it's possible, and the payoff is enormous. Here are 5 powerful tools and mindset shifts to free yourself from the curse of confirmation. Number 1. Seek to disconfirm, not just confirm. Most people ask, how can I prove I'm right? Smart thinkers ask, how could I be wrong? When you have an opinion, try this simple exercise. Make a list of arguments against your belief. Search for evidence that would disprove it. Spend time understanding the opposing viewpoint, not to win, but to learn.
This doesn't make you weaker, it makes you wiser. When you can steelman the other side, explain it in the strongest possible way, your thinking becomes sharper and more balanced. 2. Use the double loop thinking model. Most people operate in a single loop. They correct mistakes within their current belief system. But deep thinkers use double loop thinking. They don't just ask, what mistake did I make? They ask, what belief or assumption led me to that mistake? Example. Single loop. Next time I'll schedule the project better. Double loop. I assumed fast equals effective. Is that belief helping me or hurting me? Double loop thinking challenges your core assumptions and leads to transformational insight. 3. Diversify your information diet. If you always read the same sources, follow the same people, and watch the same type of content, your mind becomes a closed system. Start exposing yourself to new voices. Follow people you disagree with, not to argue, but to understand. Read books from different fields, cultures, and perspectives. Regularly ask yourself, what am I not seeing? The goal isn't to agree with everything, it's to expand your thinking. 4. Slow down and reflect. Confirmation bias thrives in fast thinking. When you rush decisions, you fall back on instinct and emotion. Reflection creates space for clarity. Ask yourself these questions. Am I interpreting this fairly or just to protect my belief? What's the evidence against my current opinion? If someone else made this argument, how would I respond? Write these in a journal. The act of slowing down and reflecting changes the way your brain processes belief. 5. Create a devil's advocate system. One of the best tools used by elite decision makers, military leaders, CEOs, and critical thinkers, is the devil's advocate, a person or system designed to challenge assumptions. You can create this for yourself. Appoint someone in your life to play devil's advocate on your ideas. Use AI tools like this one to simulate counterarguments. Before making a big decision, argue against your own position out loud or in writing. This builds mental strength and reduces overconfidence. From being right to thinking clearly. The ultimate goal of critical thinking isn't to be right, it's to see more clearly. Letting go of the need to always be correct is one of the most liberating shifts you can make. It creates mental flexibility, emotional intelligence, and better relationships. It also gives you the freedom to update your beliefs as new information becomes available, which is how successful people think. Instead of clinging to old stories, you become a learner, a question asker, a truth seeker. And when you can see beyond your bias, you begin to see reality, not just reflections of your beliefs. Mental models to combat confirmation bias. To reinforce your new thinking, use these simple mental tools. Red team thinking. Pretend you're on the opposite side. Try to beat your own idea from a different angle. OODA loop. A decision-making model from fighter pilots. Observe, orient, decide, act. The orient step challenges your assumptions before you make decisions. Bayesian updating. Instead of forming fixed beliefs, treat them like probabilities. As new information comes in, update your beliefs rather than defend them. These models help train your mind to stay flexible and honest. The takeaway. The confirmation curse is one of the most seductive traps in your mind. It feels good, it feels safe, but it limits your intelligence, narrows your perception, and often leads to poor decisions. If you want to grow, lead, innovate, and live a fulfilling life, you must outsmart your own brain. You must be willing to say, "I might be wrong. Let me find out." That sentence alone can change your life. Because the path to wisdom isn't paved with certainty, it's paved with curiosity, humility, and the courage to challenge what you think you know. Action steps to reinforce this chapter. Disconfirm one belief. Choose a belief you hold strongly and spend 15 minutes researching the opposite view. Don't argue, just understand. Echo chamber audit. Look at your social media, news sources, and conversations. Are you surrounded by sameness? If yes, make a change. Weekly reflection. Write in your journal every week, where did I possibly let bias shape my thinking this week? Challenge equals growth. Practice being wrong, publicly or privately, without shame. This builds emotional resilience and mental agility.
Chapter 3. Sunk Cost Trap. Why you stick to failing plans. Have you ever kept watching a terrible movie just because you already paid for the ticket? Stayed in a toxic relationship because of the years you've invested? Held on to a failing business because you already put in so much work? If so, you've experienced one of the most dangerous psychological traps in decision-making, the sunk cost fallacy. This trap convinces you to keep pouring time, money, energy, or emotions into something, not because it's worth it now, but because of what you've already invested. It's the mental equivalent of throwing good money after bad, clinging to the past while sacrificing the future. At its core, the sunk cost trap is about one thing: refusing to let go. And the longer you stay stuck in this mindset, the more damage it can do to your career, your happiness, your relationships, and your personal growth. The invisible chains of the past. Let's say you're in a job you hate. It drains your energy, offers no growth, and you wake up dreading every Monday. Yet you tell yourself, "I've already spent 6 years in this company. If I leave now, it'll all be for nothing." That single sentence traps millions of people every year. If the same happens with relationships, someone stays in a loveless or abusive relationship, telling themselves, "We've been together for a decade. I can't give up now." We even do it with small things, like waiting 45 minutes in a restaurant because we already waited 30, or continuing a bad course because we've already paid the tuition. In every case, the logic is the same. I've already invested too much to quit.
But here's the truth most people never confront. The cost is already gone. You can't get it back. All that matters is what's best moving forward. The psychology behind the trap. So why do we fall for this so easily? It starts with a psychological principle called loss aversion, which comes from the field of behavioral economics. In simple terms, humans feel the pain of loss twice as strongly as the pleasure of gain. We hate losing. It feels like failure, shame, or defeat. So when we walk away from something we've invested, time, money, effort, love, it feels like we're wasting it. But in reality, we're not wasting it. We're recognizing that it's already gone. This illusion is reinforced by a deeper need for consistency. Our brains don't like inconsistency. It creates cognitive dissonance. If you spent 5 years building a business that's not working, walking away feels like admitting those years were a mistake. So instead, you keep trying, keep pushing, keep investing, and the deeper you go, the harder it becomes to stop. Ironically, the smarter and more disciplined you are, the more likely you are to fall into the trap, because persistence is often praised while quitting is wrongly associated with weakness. But here's what you must remember. Letting go isn't weakness, it's wisdom. Real-life examples, trapped by the past. The business that wouldn't die. Imagine a startup founder who poured $200,000 and 3 years into a failing product. The market didn't want it. Customers weren't responding. But because he had sacrificed so much already, he couldn't walk away. He took out another loan, burned more hours, pushed his team harder. A year later, the company collapsed, not because of the original idea, but because he refused to cut his losses and pivot when it was clear the plan wasn't working. The long-term relationship that became a prison. Or take the story of a woman who had been in a relationship for 10 years. Her partner was emotionally distant, and the relationship was filled with resentment and arguments. Yet she told herself, "We've built a life together. We've gone through so much. I can't give up now." She stayed. Another 5 years passed. Eventually, she left, but with more emotional scars, fewer years, and a heart full of regret. In both cases, the person paid a heavier price because of their past, not their present. They stayed committed to the cost instead of committing to what they really wanted. How the sunk cost trap affects your daily life. This bias doesn't just show up in major life decisions. It shapes your everyday thinking, often without you realizing it. You keep reading a boring book just because you're halfway through. You stay in a class you're not learning from because you already paid for the course. You cling to outdated ideas because you've defended them for years. In all these cases, the decision to continue is based on the past, not the value of the future. And here's the key insight. Rational decisions are made based on future value, not past investment. How to break the sunk cost cycle. The good news, once you see the trap, you can escape it. It takes awareness, courage, and a mindset shift, but the payoff is enormous. Here are practical tools to help you break free. 1. Ask, would I choose this today? This is one of the most powerful mental filters you can use. Let's say you're in a job, relationship, or project. Ask yourself, if I wasn't already involved, would I choose this again today? If the answer is no, your only reason for staying is sunk cost. Use this question as your reset button. It forces you to make decisions based on the present, not on an emotional attachment to the past. 2. Focus on opportunity cost. Every time you continue with something that no longer serves you, you're saying no to something better. That's the opportunity cost, the value of what you could be doing instead. If you stay in a bad job, you're not exploring a better one. If you keep a failing product alive, you're not building one that could work. If you stay in a dead relationship, you're closing off emotional space for real connection. Once you recognize that sticking with the past is costing your future, the trap begins to lose its grip. 3. Embrace strategic quitting. Quitting is not the same as failing. It's a strategy, one of the smartest ones you can use. In fact, elite performers quit things all the time. Investors pull out of bad stocks. Athletes switch strategies. Entrepreneurs kill bad products. They know that success isn't about doing more, it's about doing what works. So ask yourself, is this a sunk cost I need to cut or a strategy I need to fix? If it's the former, quit, proudly, quickly, and without guilt. 4. Create a kill criteria list. One way to protect yourself from emotional overcommitment is to set kill criteria in advance. Before starting a project, relationship, or investment, write down a list of conditions that, if met, will trigger you to stop. For example, if this business doesn't break even in 12 months, I will reevaluate. If I feel consistently unhappy in this relationship for 3 months after open communication, I will move on. If this habit doesn't show measurable benefits in 60 days, I'll try a different one. Having this list gives you an objective filter to override emotional bias. 5. Separate identity from investment. One of the hardest parts of leaving something behind is the identity attached to it. I'm a founder. I'm a loyal partner. I'm someone who doesn't give up. But your identity isn't your job, your role, or your past choices. It's your ability to adapt, learn, and evolve. Let go of labels. Choose progress over pride. Don't let your past identity limit your future potential. The courage to let go. Breaking free from the sunk cost trap isn't easy. It takes honesty. It takes strength. But most of all, it takes courage. The courage to face the truth, pivot your path, and bet on a better future. When you stop asking, "What did I already lose?" and start asking, "What can I still gain?" that's when your decision-making transforms. Some doors need to be closed so better ones can open. Some paths need to be abandoned so you can find the right one. Some investments must be written off so you can reinvest in yourself. Action steps to reinforce this chapter. Audit your life. Identify one area, job, habit, relationship, where you might be sticking with something just because of past investment. Ask the key question: would I choose this today knowing what I know now? List the opportunity cost. Write down what you're missing out on by staying. Set a kill criteria. For any current goal, project, or relationship, define in advance when you'll quit or pivot. Declare your freedom. Write this on a sticky note. I do not owe my future to my past. The takeaway: the sunk cost trap is one of the most common and most costly mental errors we make. But once you understand it, you gain back your power. Don't let your past hold your future hostage. Don't stay on a sinking ship because you already bought the ticket. True success, clarity, and freedom begin the moment you choose to let go of what's no longer working and reach for what will. Because your greatest investment isn't what you've spent, it's what you choose next.
Chapter 4. The Availability Mirage. When easy to recall means easy to believe. Have you ever been more afraid of flying than driving, even though statistics prove driving is far riskier? Or maybe you've heard about a violent crime on the news and suddenly felt unsafe walking at night, despite living in the same quiet neighborhood for years. If so, you've experienced the availability bias, a powerful mental trap where your brain mistakes what's easy to recall for what's most likely or true. In today's world, where headlines scream for your attention and social media feeds bombard your brain with bite-sized, emotionally charged content, this trap is not just common, it's everywhere. Worse, it's reshaping how you think, what you fear, and how you make decisions. Let's break it down and reclaim your clarity. What is availability bias really? Availability bias, or the availability heuristic, is a cognitive shortcut that causes you to overestimate the importance or likelihood of events that are more vivid,
memorable, or emotionally charged simply because they're easier to remember. In other words, if something comes to your mind quickly and clearly, your brain assumes it must be important or true. This is often wrong, and dangerously so. Here's how it works. You remember a plane crash you saw on the news. Suddenly, flying seems terrifying. You read a viral tweet about a health scare, and now you're convinced you have symptoms. You hear about a business that became $1 million success overnight, and you think it's normal. But just because something is available to your mind doesn't mean it's accurate or relevant. This bias creates a mirage of meaning, making dramatic, rare events feel common and dull, common truths feel invisible. Why your brain falls for it. To understand availability bias, we need to understand your brain's operating system. Your mind is constantly processing millions of pieces of information, but you can't consciously evaluate all of it. So the brain uses shortcuts, heuristics, to make quick decisions. Availability is one of these shortcuts. When asked a question like, "How risky is flying? Is starting a business a good idea? Should I trust this person?" Your brain doesn't scan every relevant fact. It asks, what comes to mind quickly? The quicker and more emotionally charged the answer, the more confident your brain feels, even if that answer is wrong, outdated, or based on an exception rather than the rule. In other words, speed of recall becomes a substitute for truth. How this distorts your thinking. 1. Fear-based decision-making. The media thrives on attention, and nothing grabs attention like fear. News outlets show plane crashes, murders, natural disasters, and economic collapse on a loop because fear sells. As a result, people develop irrational fears. You fear terrorism more than heart disease, even though the latter kills millions more. You worry about school shootings, but ignore the dangers of texting while driving. You stockpile during rare events, but neglect daily habits that quietly impact your health. These fears are fueled by availability, not probability. 2. Overestimating rare events. People tend to drastically overestimate the likelihood of rare, sensational events and underestimate the likelihood of common, boring ones. You hear about one person who lost weight with a fad diet, and now you're convinced it works, ignoring the 99% who didn't. You remember a friend who made big money on crypto, so you jump in, forgetting the thousands who lost everything. You're not dumb, you're being misled by memory. The easier something is to recall, especially if it's emotional, the more it feels representative, even if it's a statistical outlier. 3. Skewed risk perception. Because your brain is wired to survive, it gives extra weight to anything associated with threat or pain. This is great when avoiding snakes in the wild. Not so great when you're trying to make rational financial, health, or career choices. Example. After seeing news about a plane crash, your fear of flying spikes, but you still drive without wearing a seatbelt. Or after hearing one story about someone getting scammed online, you avoid all online opportunities, even legitimate ones. These irrational fears create avoidance, anxiety, and poor decision-making. Availability bias in action. Let's walk through some real-world examples.
You hear about one person who had a severe side effect from a vaccine, and now you hesitate to take it, even if it's statistically safe for millions. You remember the one horror story, not the tens of thousands of uneventful ones. Investing. The media reports constantly on stock market crashes, making people fear investing. Meanwhile, long-term data shows consistent returns for patient investors. But most people react to headlines, not history. Relationships. You had one bad breakup or betrayal, so now you avoid emotional intimacy altogether. Or you assume everyone cheats because your last partner did.
Your mind overgeneralizes the past because it's easy to recall, but it's not always representative. The emotional amplifier. Emotion plays a huge role in this trap. Highly emotional memories are easier to store and easier to retrieve. That's why painful or shocking events, even if rare, often feel more real or more important than calm, consistent, and accurate experiences. So while your brain should ask, what's most likely to happen, it instead asks, what scared me the most last time? This emotional bias drives impulsive choices and clouds long-term vision. How to escape the availability mirage. Awareness is the first step. Once you see how this trap works, you can start to reclaim control of your thinking. Here are several mental tools and strategies to break free. 1. Ask, is this vivid or valid? Every time you feel strong fear, urgency, or belief, pause and ask, am I reacting to vivid information or valid information? Vivid is emotional, extreme, memorable. Valid is data-driven, measured, consistent. If your thinking is based only on what feels vivid, you're likely under the influence of availability bias. 2. Use base rates, not headlines. Base rates are statistical averages, the reality over time. Instead of reacting to exceptions, ask what usually happens in this situation. Example, base rate, commercial airline travel is safer than driving. Bias, but I just saw a crash on TV. By anchoring your thinking in base rates, you make decisions grounded in fact, not fear. 3. Limit your media exposure. News and social media don't exist to inform you, they exist to sell your attention. The more dramatic and outrageous the story, the more likely it will dominate your mind. Set healthy boundaries. Don't watch 24/7 news loops. Read facts, not just headlines. Seek long-form, balanced content over sensational sound bites. Your mind is your garden. Don't let media plant weeds. 4. Keep a decision journal. Before making important choices, especially emotionally charged ones, write down what information you're relying on, where it came from, whether it's backed by data or just easy to remember. This creates awareness and forces your brain to slow down and think critically. 5. Challenge the story. When a story or memory dominates your thoughts, ask, what's the bigger picture? Is this the rule or the exception? Am I using this one story to define everything? You're not just your memories, you're your ability to question your memories. 6. Train your mind with ratio thinking. Instead of saying, one person died from this, ask, out of how many? What's the percentage? What's the probability compared to other risks? One death in 10,000 is very different than one death in 10. But your mind reacts the same, unless you train it to think in ratios, not reactions. Mental models to reinforce clear thinking. To further protect yourself from availability bias, apply these mental models. Second-order thinking. Ask what happens after your first reaction. Example, if I avoid flying, what are the long-term trade-offs? Inversion. Flip the situation. If this story didn't come to mind, what would I do? Statistical thinking. Train yourself to think in probabilities, not stories. Use 1% better decisions consistently, not dramatic one-offs. These models create a mental firewall against emotional bias. The takeaway. Availability bias is a master illusionist. It seduces your mind with powerful memories and vivid stories, making you believe that what's most memorable is also most meaningful. But the truth is often quieter, less dramatic, and hidden behind the noise. If you want to make decisions rooted in reality, not reaction, you must go beyond what's easy to remember. You must seek what's hard to distort: data, perspective, and principle-based thinking. Because clear thinking is not about having a better memory, it's about having better filters for your memory. Action steps to reinforce this chapter. Identify a vivid belief you hold, one based on memory, not fact. Research the data behind it. Track your media input for a week. What kinds of stories are shaping your fear or judgment? Create a base rate cheat sheet for areas where you tend to panic, like health, finance, or relationships. Use this in moments of uncertainty. Ask someone to challenge your assumptions. Often others can see where your thinking is being influenced by recent memory or emotional recall. You now have the tools to stop letting your brain's memory tricks dictate your future. You no longer need to trust your first thought. You can train your next thought to be better. Because in the end, thinking clearly isn't about thinking fast. It's about thinking deeply, deliberately, and beyond the mirage.
Chapter 5. Herd Thinking, the hidden cost of following the crowd. Have you ever agreed with a decision you didn't fully believe in just because everyone else seemed to agree? Or bought a product because it was trending, even though you didn't need it? Or stayed silent in a group discussion because voicing your real opinion would make you stand out? If so, you've experienced herd thinking, the subtle, powerful influence of the crowd on your decisions. Also known as groupthink, herd behavior, or social conformity, this mental trap causes smart people to suppress independent thinking in favor of following others. It's a behavior rooted deep in our evolutionary past, amplified by modern technology, and costing us clarity, creativity, and critical judgment every single day. You might believe you're thinking independently, but if you're constantly surrounded by group opinions, trending headlines, and peer pressure, you may be unknowingly outsourcing your brain to the crowd. And that comes with a hidden cost. Why herd thinking exists? A survival instinct in a modern world. To understand herd thinking, we must first understand its origin. Thousands of years ago, survival was deeply tied to the tribe. Being accepted by the group meant protection, food, safety, and reproductive success. Standing out, or going against the group, often meant exile, isolation, or death. So evolution favored brains that were wired to conform. We developed a psychological fear of being wrong alone, even if we were right. We began to equate agreement with safety and disagreement with danger. Fast forward to today, you're no longer living in a prehistoric tribe, but your brain still reacts as if you are. When you find yourself in a meeting, classroom, or social group and everyone agrees on something, even if you have doubts, your brain sends out a warning signal. Don't challenge the group. Stay safe. Stay silent. It's not cowardice, it's wiring. But in a world where success depends on creativity, innovation, and independent thought, that ancient wiring becomes a modern handicap. How herd thinking shows up in your life. Let's examine some common situations where herd thinking silently steers your decisions. 1. Meetings and team decisions. You're in a group meeting. Your manager proposes a flawed strategy, and everyone nods in agreement. You see the holes, but no one else speaks up, so you stay silent too. Later, the strategy fails, and everyone thinks, "I knew it wouldn't work." This is classic groupthink, a term coined by psychologist Irving Janis. It describes the tendency of groups to prioritize harmony and consensus over realistic appraisal of alternatives. When people suppress their doubts to maintain group unity, bad decisions multiply. 2. Trends, fads, and viral behavior. Whether it's fashion, investing, diets, or business strategies, the crowd tends to run in cycles. Everyone buys into Bitcoin when it's rising. Everyone joins a fitness trend when it's viral. Everyone starts a podcast, a drop shipping store, or buys the next productivity tool because everyone else is doing it. This is known as the bandwagon effect, the tendency to adopt beliefs, behaviors, or trends because others are doing so. Often these decisions are made without deep thinking or personal alignment. It feels safe because the crowd can't be wrong, but history has proven otherwise. 3. Silence in social groups. In conversations with friends or colleagues, have you ever nodded in agreement with something you disagreed with just to avoid conflict? That's pluralistic ignorance, a situation where everyone thinks they're the only one who disagrees, and because no one speaks up, the group ends up falsely believing everyone agrees. In other words, everyone is pretending and nobody knows it. The hidden dangers of herd thinking. At first glance, going with the crowd might seem harmless. After all, consensus can build unity, speed up decisions, and reduce conflict. But the hidden cost of blind conformity is steep. 1. You lose your authentic voice. Each time you silence your inner voice to match the group, you weaken your ability to think independently. Over time, your opinions become less your own and more a reflection of what others think. You start shaping your decisions around approval, not principles. 2. Creativity gets crushed. Innovation comes from dissent, not conformity. Every major breakthrough in science, business, or art started with someone saying, "What if we're wrong?" Herd thinking suppresses this curiosity. It rewards sameness and punishes deviation. As a result, organizations, schools, and even relationships become echo chambers, safe, predictable, and stagnant. 3. You make worse decisions. When the crowd gets it wrong, which they often do, the results can be catastrophic. Examples: the 2008 financial crisis, driven by mass overconfidence in a flawed mortgage system. The dot-com bubble, where investors blindly followed hype instead of fundamentals. Mass panics, example during COVID-19, where misinformation spread faster than facts, driven by crowd fear, not science. And each case involves smart people making dumb decisions because they followed the herd instead of their own analysis. Why it feels so hard to resist? You might wonder, why do I fall for this even when I know better? Because the social cost of standing out often feels higher than the personal cost of being wrong.
Psychological studies have confirmed this. In the 1950s, psychologist Solomon Asch ran a famous experiment. Participants were asked to judge the length of lines. When Confederates, planted actors, in the room all gave the wrong answer, over 75% of participants conformed at least once, even when they knew it was wrong. This shows how deeply wired our need to conform really is. We will often choose to be socially accepted over logically correct. But clarity, growth, and success don't come from blending in. They come from thinking for yourself, even when it's uncomfortable. How to break free from the herd. Escaping herd thinking doesn't mean becoming a contrarian for the sake of it. It means developing the courage and clarity to think critically and independently, even in a world that rewards agreement. Here's how. 1. Slow down group decisions. Herd thinking thrives on speed. The faster a group decides, the less room there is for reflection or dissent. Whether you're in a meeting or making a big decision with others, insert deliberate pauses. Let's all take 10 minutes to reflect before voting. Or, can we list counter-arguments before moving forward? Or, is anyone playing devil's advocate here? Create room for disagreement. It protects against groupthink and often improves the final outcome. 2. Be the first to ask, what are we missing? One question can change a room. If you feel something's being overlooked, ask, what assumptions are we making here? Is there a downside we're not seeing? Or, if this fails, what would be the reason? These questions invite critical thinking without direct confrontation. They often encourage others who were silently doubting to speak up too. 3. Build a bias for data, not hype. Before jumping on a trend, ask, what's the long-term data? Is this aligned with my goals, or just popular? Am I doing this because it's right for me, or because it feels safe? In a noisy world, clarity comes from returning to your own criteria for value.
4. Know when to follow and when to walk alone. Following the crowd isn't always wrong. Sometimes the group is wise. This is known as the wisdom of crowds. But the key is intentional alignment, not blind obedience. Follow when the group has diverse perspectives. The decision is backed by evidence, not emotion. You've checked the facts yourself and agree rationally. Walk alone when the group is driven by fear, urgency, or hype. No one is challenging the consensus. You feel a quiet internal resistance that you haven't explored yet. 5. Practice micro-dissent. Train your brain to be comfortable with standing out. You don't need to be loud or rebellious, just willing to differ. Examples: say, "I'm not sure," in a room full of certainty. Offer an unpopular but thoughtful opinion. Or choose a different path when your gut says to. These small acts of courage build mental independence, your strongest defense against herd thinking. Mental models to strengthen independent thinking. Use these tools to break the cycle of conformity. First principles thinking. Break down beliefs to their foundational truths and rebuild them logically. Don't rely on "this is how everyone does it." Inversion. Ask, "how could this go wrong?" Or, "what would I do if I wanted this to fail?" The 10-10-10 rule. How will I feel about this decision 10 minutes, 10 months, and 10 years from now? This removes short-term crowd pressure. Red teaming. Intentionally challenge ideas from the opposite view. This is how military and intelligence groups stress test decisions. Action steps to reinforce this chapter. Audit your group decisions. Reflect on one recent group decision you followed. Ask, did I truly agree or just conform? Have a devil's advocate. Appoint someone in your life to regularly challenge your assumptions. Start a thought journal. Write down when you felt pressure to agree with others. What stopped you from speaking up? Build silence into decisions. Add 24-hour pauses to big decisions influenced by others. Reevaluate your view after the emotion fades. Lead with a question. In your next group setting, be the one who asks, "What are we not considering?" The takeaway. Herd thinking is comforting, but it's also costly. It replaces clarity with consensus and insight with imitation. If you want to rise above the noise, you must train yourself to think boldly, independently, and deliberately. This doesn't mean rejecting others. It means learning to hear the crowd, but not be controlled by it. Because the moment you stop thinking like everyone else, you start thinking for yourself. And that's where real power and progress begins.